As it has been hinted so far, TDMorph is a rather deep toolbox, in the sense that it has various parts that interact with each other in a modular way. We have just scratched the surface. I want to introduce you here to the SceneLauncher. The SceneLauncher is a front end, pretty much like this is a front end, because it has sliders, controllers that interact with a preset manager inside. So we can create a SceneLauncher by going to Tools and pressing the first item in the list, and we get a new comp, which looks like this. So we see that it's pretty much a system of columns and rows. Why do I say that this is a front end? Well, if you go to SceneLauncher, to the Inputs page, you see that there's a parameter for Preset Manager. Now you know what that is. By default, to help you, it has an expression that points to the first container in TDMorph and tries to grab its preset manager. So it is trying to grab all these presets and all these parameters, because that's my container number 1. How do these compare to each other? Since they are both looking at the same preset manager, then whatever I do in this side or in this UI will be reflected in here, and vice versa. To demonstrate that, let me create a new preset here. So I'm going to randomize the noise that I had before and create a new preset in slot number 4. See what happens in this column. A new preset has been created in here. Now, what happens, for example, if I delete preset number 1 from this column here? See what happens in this row. Number 1 is now gone from here. And again, that is because they are both talking to the same preset manager that lives inside of TDMorph. This has nothing to do with these sliders, these preset buttons, nothing. It's just simply because inside there's a preset manager that they are both listening to. With that being said, now let's move out of here and deal with the preset manager we created down. And we're going to do that because the recommended way of working with this SceneLauncher is that you'd compose something in here, and when you're done with your parametric settings, you just want to queue them. So this is a queuing mechanism, the SceneLauncher, while the elements container is more meant to be an exploratory tool. Of course, you feel free to play with them as you wish, but keep in mind that having these two visible at the same time while performing is very inefficient, because these sliders take a lot of memory to cook. So if you really want to do that, you can hide these two, but the recommended approach is to simply don't have this at all open, because you don't need that. You can just do the queuing here. Again, find your own workflow, but that is the word of advice if you want to get the best out of performance. So now, since you know that this preset manager is very, very flexible, it's totally modular, you don't need to look at that preset manager, we can look at our own. You could even look at one that a friend of yours has passed you, so it doesn't really matter. Now, let's pass this preset manager to this field and see what happens. Suddenly, I see that my list has changed. Now it has different names. And that is because, remember how we save these names here. The list is preset 0, preset 1, and preset 2. That's what we see. Right. So now that hopefully preset manager and the mechanism is clear, let's dive into the functioning of this tool. The SceneLauncher is pretty much a system of columns and rows. Interacting with it is very simple because all you need to do is left click, right click, or type some parameter. Let's focus now on this left field. This is the column for presets. So in here, we're only gonna list everything that the preset manager has. So it is purely informative. That means that if you click on these cells, nothing will happen. It is simply showing you what is available for you in the preset manager that you provided to your SceneLauncher. So what can we do here? Well, naturally, we can create new presets. So if I right click on this space and select new preset, I can create another one. We can delete them by pressing on this big X. We can clear all the presets, which I'm not going to do since I want to use this. And we can also override the values of a given preset. So let's say I want to change one of them, for example, this colored one, I want it to be more spaced out, like this. And now I can overwrite whatever preset I want. So let's say I want to overwrite preset 2. Now the previous values have been replaced. Of course, I cannot really inspect any of that data because it doesn't trigger anything. To trigger this, I will need to create scenes. Now let's go to this right field here. The mechanism is the same. To create a new scene, just right-click on the empty space, select New Scene, and type here a name for that. You always need to create a unique name for your scenes. Let's call this Scene 1. This creates this row with those properties. So we see that we have a color. This allows you to color code it according to something you may find convenient. It is assigned randomly to a default color, so it's a default random color on creation of the scene. So you can change that to your wishes. The scene name can be altered as well. So if you want to get rid of the space, or you want to name it completely different, so it's scene 1, you can do that at any point. The launch is a button that executes the scene, but this is absolutely dependent on the target. So launch and target are absolutely dependent of each other, or let's say launch is dependent on the target, because if you have no target, so none, doesn't matter if you press this, nothing will happen. This has to be one of the available presets that you have in this column. So how to enter it? You can either double click here and just type a valid preset, and now if you launch this, it will work. Or you can right click on it and select some valid preset from the menu, which is preferable perhaps because it's less error prone. So I'm going to choose preset 1 here, and I'm going to launch that. So it hasn't moved because clearly it has the same values that before. So let's override this. Now we know how to override it. I'm going to select some random value, and preset 1 is going to be now this. So now we can really see if what I said before is true. Let's now move back to preset 0, and now let's go back to preset 1. So that is the case. Perfect. Now these other things are quite obvious, I hope. Length is just the morphing time in seconds. The delay is a little delay or a long delay that you may wish to apply to the launch. So if I put here 1 and I launch it, it will wait 1 second before it launches. And the curve is the curves that we already saw before. So if you right click here, you will see all that are available for us. I'm going to choose the S curve for this particular scene. The action I'm going to leave for a little bit later. And finally we have this X, which destroys the scene. Okay, let's create some more scenes. So let's call this one scene 2. Assigned to this one a little bit of a different length. I will remove the delays for all of them so we don't have to wait to see them in action. I'm going to change the curve. I'm going to assign this to be preset 2, for example. And finally, I'm going to create one last scene, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way, which is instead of right-clicking here and pressing New Scene, I'm simply going to drag and drop one of my presets in this field. This will also create a scene, but it will do so by assigning automatically the drag and drop preset to the target. So it is perhaps faster to do it in this way. All right, now we have 3 presets, and all of them, they refer to different states, of course, of my parameters. Now, what I can do is I can also reorder this in an arbitrary way if I wish to do so, and that accounts the same for these presets. This in presets, however, is a bit useless because it doesn't really matter in what order they are. The true order is in here. So yeah, perhaps you want to do that in the scenes and not so much in the presets. Okay, perfect. Like I said before, you can rename this as you wish. So I'm not going to do that now. Just know that it's possible. And now let me explain what these actions do. So an action is basically something to do when the scene reaches its end. So if I launch this scene 1, when it reaches the end, something gets executed if action is different than none. So what are the possible actions? You can see all of them also listed in these buttons. So you can trigger them either from here, or you can programmatically set them in your scenes. Let's say I am on scene 1, and imagine this is some sort of performance that requires you to press a scene on some cue. So I can simply do here next. If I press next, I move to the next scene in the queue. I press next again, the next one. So all these actions, they are quite self-explanatory. For example, first, the last one, any means any on the list, including the current cell, and other means any except for the current one. Or other, sorry, yeah, that's what I said, I hope. And then finally we have repeats, which repeats the same one, and sequence, which I'm gonna leave for the last. Okay, now let's programmatically set this in here. As you may have imagined already, we could create a loop by doing this. I just noticed though that preset 0 might be the same as preset 1, so maybe we don't see a change. So let's just make sure that preset 0 is different. So let's just overwrite preset 0 with this, and let's launch this. So see how this goes in a loop now, because it ends next, next, and first, and so on, because this one creates the loop. If I put this on none, then the loop is broken, because when it reaches here, it has no action to take. If you have a loop and you want to break it, you can also simply press in here with the stop morphing button. This will cancel the morphing. You can also pause the loop if you're going, and re-enable it by pressing play. All right. Now, the last thing I wanted to show is this final sequence button, which is a special case. So what this will do is just go in order, ignoring completely the actions. So it doesn't matter what you have here, it will just go one by one in order, which may be something desirable and convenient if you don't want to every time replace this, if you want to have a sequence.